Something is already happening inside you, not a vague, inspirational kind of happening. Something is genuinely, unmistakably coming undone right now. There is a word for what you are going through. There is a map, and the man who drew it nearly lost his mind. His name was Carl Jung. What he found on the other side of his own darkness became the most honest practical guide ever written. It covers what happens when a human being starts to truly wake up. Before this ends, you will understand exactly what is happening to you. You will understand why it is happening, and what the 3 traps are that destroy most people before they ever make it through. You know the feeling. The anxiety that arrives at 2 in the morning with no explanation, no cause, no warning signal whatsoever. The creeping sense that the life you have carefully assembled does not actually belong to you. It belongs to someone else entirely. The exhaustion of maintaining a face of normalcy when everything underneath feels like it is quietly, steadily, invisibly dissolving away. The part that makes it stranger, nobody around you seems to be in it. Your coworkers crack jokes and talk about last night's game. Your family keeps to its routines. Your friends post vacation photos. And you sit there wondering if you are going quietly insane, or if everyone else is simply better at pretending. Here is what someone should have told you long before now. You are not going crazy. You are not falling apart. What you are experiencing has a name, a structure, and a long history behind it spanning many centuries. Human beings have walked it before you and come out the other side, not intact, not unscathed, but more real and more whole, more genuinely alive than they had ever been before. Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist who worked in the early 20th century. Before you dismiss this as a history lesson, understand what he actually did. At 38, he was at the absolute peak of his career. At the peak of his reputation and career, Jung deliberately walked into his own psychological darkness. He chose to go in. For 6 years, he recorded visions so disturbing, they terrified him. He heard voices so vivid, he questioned his own sanity repeatedly. He experienced a collapse so thorough that he later wrote he was seriously threatened by what he called a psychosis. 6 full years. His colleagues abandoned him. His family feared he had lost his mind. He nearly destroyed everything he had spent decades carefully building. But what he uncovered in that darkness became a map for the rest of us. Not a wellness retreat map, the real kind. Kind that tears you open. Jung identified 3 specific traps that destroy most people during this exact process of awakening. 3 patterns he watched people fall into again and again. Understanding them is not a guarantee you will avoid them, but it helps. Understanding them is the difference between being devoured by the process and being transformed by it. The first trap looks like progress. This is exactly why the first trap is so easy to miss. Every one of us, beginning in childhood, learns which parts are acceptable and which parts are not acceptable. The lesson is delivered fast, it is delivered without mercy, and it never needs to be repeated twice. You throw a tantrum and the room goes cold. You cry and someone says toughen up. You get excited and the room falls silent. So you learn, you pack those parts away. You bury the anger, you silence the need. You hide the strangeness where none can find it. You construct a version of yourself that is presentable, manageable, and safe to show the world every single morning you wake up. Jung had a name for everything you buried. He called it the shadow. And here is the thing about the shadow that changes everything. It does not disappear simply because you stop looking at it. The shadow remains exactly where you left it. Patient, present, permanent. Think of it like a basement. You spend years throwing things down there. Old boxes, broken pieces, everything you do not want to deal with. You shut the door and get on with life. But the stuff is still down there, and when awakening begins, something kicks that door open. Suddenly, you are feeling rage you cannot explain, jealousy that shames you, desires that feel too intense, destructive thoughts that scare you. Your first instinct is to slam that door back shut, to meditate harder, to pray more, to tell yourself these feelings are not spiritual. But what Jung discovered, and this is crucial, is that the shadow is not your enemy. It is not trying to destroy you at all. The shadow is the part of you that got left behind. It is not trying to destroy you. It is trying to complete you instead. He said something that sounds harsh until you sit with it long enough. He said he would rather be whole than good. Remember that. Not because goodness does not matter, but because goodness built on denial is not actually goodness at all. It is a performance instead, and performances eventually collapse. Jung worked this out through his own descent into his own inner world below the surface. He found himself experiencing what he called murder fantasies, violent and disturbing images that terrified him completely, and without warning. And instead of running from them or spiritualizing them into something comfortable, he sat with them. He drew them. He wrote them out fully. He asked what they were trying to tell him. What he found on the other side was not evil. It was energy, raw life force. Raw, undirected, powerful life force that had been locked away for decades. The people who actually come through this process do one thing. They stop treating the shadow like a problem to be eliminated and start treating it like a message to be understood with openness. When something dark surfaces in you, the real question is not how to get rid of it. What truth have you been afraid to hold? But even if you begin that work, even if you start facing your shadow with honesty and courage, a second trap is waiting patiently. And it is far sneakier than the first because it disguises itself as the best version of you. The most evolved version of you yet. Genuine spiritual experiences start happening when you have moments of real clarity, real presence, real contact with something larger. Watch carefully. Your ego does not disappear. It evolves. It upgrades its strategy. It puts on a spiritual costume and pretends it has been fully defeated. Suddenly, you are not just a person having a meaningful experience. You are someone who has been chosen. You have a mission given to you. You see things others cannot see. You feel called to help others wake up, and just beneath the surface, almost invisible, you grow superior. Jung called this ego inflation. He said it was more dangerous than staying asleep, because at least when asleep you know you are not awake. When your ego inflates around spiritual content, you become blind to your own blindness. This is the core danger of the second trap, precisely. He documented a patient, a successful businessman in his early 40s, who began experiencing what could only be described as genuine synchronicities. Things aligned in his life in remarkable ways. He felt lit up and deeply connected, and then his ego seized on those experiences immediately. He started to believe he had cracked the code of reality, that he possessed a gift no one else had. He left his family completely. He abandoned his career and launched a spiritual movement. Within a year he was living on the streets, convinced he alone could see truth. Jung spent 3 years working with him, carefully separating the genuine experiences from the ego narrative constructed around them with patience. Here is how you know inflation is happening to you. You stop questioning yourself. You become certain you cannot tolerate criticism at all. You see signs everywhere confirming your special status. You grow impatient with people who do not understand. You feel you have arrived. Jung's answer was what he called relativizing the ego. It does not need destroying. It needs to be placed in its proper role. Ego is a container, a vessel, not the source of what moves through you. When lightning strikes, no one calls the rod the storm. Every time you feel spiritually superior to someone, ask yourself this: what is the part of me that still needs to feel special right now? That question will humble you quickly, and that humility is not weakness. It is the only thing that keeps you sane as you go deeper. But even if you handle the shadow and catch the inflation, there is a third trap. In many ways, it is the cruelest one. Because it does not come from inside you. It comes from the people you love, and it arrives wearing the convincing face of concern. Jung wrote about the problem of the returned hero. In every great myth, the hero journeys out, faces darkness, and finds something real. The hero comes home. It sounds like a satisfying ending, but Jung noticed something the myths tend to gloss over entirely and carefully avoid. When the hero returns changed, the village does not throw a parade. The village tries to put them back in the box always. Not out of malice, not because the people in your life are bad, but because your transformation is a mirror they cannot hold. And mirrors make people deeply uncomfortable when they are not ready to look. This is the pressure the third trap delivers most effectively. When you start showing up differently, more honest, less tolerant of hollow small talk, less willing to play the old roles, they feel it immediately. And their response looks like concern while functioning as pressure. Your partner says you seem distant. Your parents ask if you are all right. Your friends joke that you have gotten strange. Your coworkers treat you as though you believe you are better than everyone around you now. And the message underneath all of it is identical. Come back. Be who you were. We preferred that version of you entirely. Jung worked with a woman, a lawyer and a mother of 2, who had done enormous inner work. She had faced her shadow. She had caught her inflation. She had developed what he would describe as genuine consciousness. She came back home to her family fully transformed. And when she returned to her life, her family unconsciously dismantled it piece by piece, not with arguments, but with dinner table comments. With sighs, with 1,000 small gestures that people who love you can deploy to make you feel wrong for changing. Sighs work powerfully. Jung called the mechanism behind this the participation mystique. Every family, every close group involves unconscious psychological fusion between members. You share assumptions, you share blind spots, you reinforce each other's constructed personas. This is the invisible glue of every close group. And when one person begins to genuinely individuate, when one person actually starts to wake up, they break that fusion. The group feels it. The group feels it as loss, as threat. The version of you that shared that unconsciousness is, in a real sense, gone. And the people who love that version are grieving without fully understanding why. This grief is real. It deserves real acknowledgement and compassion. Jung's answer was not to abandon the people you love, and it was not to abandon yourself. It was something far more difficult than either. He called it holding the tension of opposites, staying fully present to those you love, without betraying what you now know to be true. Remaining in relationship without pretending to be asleep. Being awake in a world that is mostly dreaming, without judgment, without superiority. Without vanishing, he called the people who develop this capacity translators. Not people who explain their awakening, people who embody it quietly. They create space simply by how they are for others to begin asking their own questions. This is the genuine translator's capacity. Here is what ties all three traps together, and this is the part that matters most. Spiritual awakening is not a destination. It never was. It is a sustained process of dying, not physically, but psychologically. Every layer you shed, every illusion you release, is a death of some kind. Every identity you outgrow is a death, and it keeps happening. It does not conclude after one dramatic breakthrough. The process is ongoing always. Jung was still dying to old versions of himself in his 80s, still finding new shadows, still catching his ego in fresh inflations. Always still navigating the discomfort of being more conscious than comfortable. Near the end of his life, he had a dream. He recorded it carefully. In the dream, he was a student again, sitting in a classroom, knowing nothing. After decades of building an entire school of psychology entirely, after becoming one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, his own unconscious looked him in the face and said this clearly: "You are still a beginner. That is the price of real consciousness. You never get to arrive. You never get to declare yourself finished." Most people cannot accept that. They want awakening to deliver a final destination, a settled version of themselves, a peace they never re-earn. That is not what this is. At its best, this is what Jung called individuation, becoming who you always were before the world. Becoming who you always were before the world told you who you should be. Not transcending your humanity, not rising above it, fully inhabiting it, including the parts you were taught to be ashamed of, the anger, the desire, the fear, the contradictions. All of it held at once. He described this as the union of opposites, not choosing light over dark, but containing both. Not picking strength over weakness, but knowing both. Not being spiritual or human, but being fully, consciously human, in a way that most people never have the courage to actually risk choosing. Here is what no one in the wellness industry tells you. This is not peaceful, not most of the time, not bliss, not constant clarity. It is conscious suffering, choosing to see what is real, even when what is real is painful. This is the honest cost of wakefulness. It is carrying a truth most people are not ready for, and learning to hold it without letting it isolate you or make you rigid. But what do you actually do with all of this? If you are in the middle of it now, here is what Jung's work asks. Stop fighting the shadow. The darkness surfacing in you is not evidence that something has gone wrong. It is evidence something is finally going right. Ask it what it carries, give it a voice, write it out, draw it. Speak to it as though it has something important to say. Watch your ego. Every time you feel spiritually certain, spiritually superior, or specifically chosen, take that as your signal to get humble immediately. Real awakening does not make you feel elevated above others. It makes you feel more human, more connected, more compassionate toward everyone in the dark. Because you remember exactly what that felt like. You remember being in the dark yourself. That memory becomes the ground of real compassion. Stay in your relationships without disappearing into them. The people who love you are not your enemies for wanting the old version of you back. They are scared, and you being genuinely, quietly real, not preachy, not superior, just present, is the most honest thing you can offer them now. You cannot drag anyone with you on this journey, but you can light a candle. That is the fullest thing one person can offer another. And finally, stop trying to survive this. Jung's deepest insight was this: you do not survive spiritual awakening. This was his most radical finding. The version of you that began this journey was never going to make it out. That version was never meant to. That was the point. What comes through the other side is not better, not higher, not more enlightened. Just more real, more yours, more complete than it was before. Your breakdown is not your failure. It is your breakthrough wearing a disguise. Your dissolution is not your ending. It is your beginning presented hidden. Your symptoms are not the problem. They are the process. The question was never whether you would survive. It was never about survival. The question is whether you will let it finish what it started, whether you will stay present long enough for the work to complete. If this found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs it, not to wake them up, just to offer company. Because the loneliest part of this journey is believing you are the only one on it. You are not. You are never alone in this. And if you want to go deeper into what Jung found on the other side of all of this, that is exactly what comes next.